Hello and welcome to another episode of DIY EV Chat. My name's Tom Cheesewright, and every time on this podcast, vidcast, whatever you want to call it, I get on a guest, somebody else who's either built their own EV or someone who contributes to the community in one way or another. And today's guest is a proper car person with a variety of interesting projects. It is Alex Meek. Welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Good evening, Tom. Thank you for having me.
Now, I always start with the same question because people always ask me, what skills do you need to go and do a project like this? What's the day job? Do you bring anything sort of professional skill-wise to building your own EV?
Slightly, I suppose. I'm actually now head of IT for a not-for-profit organisation.
Okay.
My background is in development, but going back quite a long way into kind of minis and mainframes, and I still dabble with Arduinos and stuff like that. So I've kept my hand in a lot of Internet of Things projects around the house, monitoring the boiler and the solar so electrically always been my thing, even from the age of 16. Hobby magazines, hobby electronics for people who remember it, and building amplifiers and stuff like that. So always on that, and then into coding later on. But I'm not particularly good at either, to be honest. I just sort of muddle through. I still do Vero board, the occasional PCB, but I keep it simple, and I'm quite pragmatic, I think, with the approach to things.
But on the other side, on the mechanical side, because it seems that everybody comes to this, or lots of people come to these projects with one of the three skill sets, whether that's electronics, computing, or the mechanical stuff. But I suspect you, from a hobby side, you've got a bit of all three.
Yeah, I think a smattering of all three. We have a 1971 historic race car, which I've been racing for the best part of 15 years now, and maintaining that myself apart from the engine build, so everything else on it.
I have to say that thing is A, gorgeous, and B, also looks absolutely terrifying to drive.
It's a heap of fun. I mean, they're pretty quick. They're light. It's only 420 kilos, only 120 horsepower, but it's pretty quick, and it's open wheels.
That's a pretty good ratio.
It is, and it's open wheels, so you have to be careful about who you bump into because they'll flip over in an instant. So I've had my moments in it. I've had one big accident in it, and it didn't put me off, but I think I was always a little bit slower after that. And it's historic racing. People, at the end of the day, most of them want to bring the car home in one piece. So there's a respect, and they're mostly kind of older gents like myself, so not the young guns. Having said that, somebody who won the series a few years ago is now a McLaren GT3 racer for real. If the young guns come in and can win it, then they're reckoned to be pretty good drivers. And I think what happened over time is that when I started, I was nearer the front, and then people came into it realising it was a cost-effective form of motorsport, and gradually I got pushed down the field as the younger, faster people came in. So,
not necessarily so cost-effective now, I understand. Isn't the car quite valuable these days?
That not especially. No, I think that's maybe £25,000 worth. It's
okay.
As race cars go, it's not hugely valuable. They're easy to maintain, so it's just tubular chassis and cross-flow engine and things. So pretty simple, which is part of the attraction. I didn't have lots of money to pay people to maintain it. And then alongside that, we also built a half-built kit car during lockdown, bought that and finished that off. And that was really a decision to kind of... My wife used to drive the Formula 4 before the kids came along.
Okay.
Decided she couldn't really justify, the cost of it just for the fun she was having. So we sort of said, well, let's buy a track car, and we finished that off. And we've had a load of fun in that little low cost with an MX-5 engine, and my son's been involved. We put a standalone ECU in it, and it's good, cheap fun. You can drive all day for 250 quid, and if the engine dies, you buy another one for 200 quid and put it in. It's as motorsport goes. It's not racing. It's not head to head. It lacks some of the adrenaline part of it, but it's 90% there really. So we're doing a bit more of that now, and we also ride enduro bikes. So,
oh wow!
My wife rides. My son rides with me. He's now quicker than me, having just turned 15. He's just gone up to 125 and is now much quicker than Daddy. But we go out and do enduro kind of just pay and play sessions. So I maintain all the bikes for that, and pull apart a two-stroke engine and things like that. So mechanically self-taught. A neighbour across the road who got me into historic racing has has helped enormously, and he's got a big lathe, and I've got a little lathe, and between us we can muddle through most things mechanically.
So a proper petrol head then.
Yes, very much so. And in my wife's family, her father is something of a legend in mini circles. He set up and ran special tuning during the 70s.
Wow.
And although he passed away last year, but he's known throughout the world, and the whole family is car and mini mad. So there was no getting away from it really, and my son's following in the footsteps.
So how did the transition come about then? How did you? What attracted you to the EV community?
Well, I was funny. Just before we came on, I was talking to my wife about it, and she said, "Actually, you remember, probably 12 years ago, you started looking at it. I was doing a 50-mile each-way commute and burning up lots of petrol. And I looked at, using an old forklift motor and lead-acid batteries, as was kind of the way back then. Did some calculations and just decided it wasn't viable. I was never going to get the range I needed without it weighing 3 tons and things like that. And I found a spreadsheet the other day, and all the calculations there, I just kind of gave up at that stage and thought, it's just not going to happen. And then I think I came across Damien's videos, how so many of these people start. Well, here's a character, and he's getting stuck in and doing it. And he, like somebody said the video before, he's just inspired. And I thought, he's not an AK, but he gets stuck in and he gets on with it and he tries things. And that approach sort of appealed to me. And I just sort of said to my wife, well, look, we've got these 2 old cars. What if I built an EV and we got rid of one of them? And I used the EV as my daily. So we sort of struck a deal and a budget. And I started looking into it seriously and came across open inverter and all that. And, it sort of went from there, really.
And so was the goal to build something that was really practical, like something you could daily?
Yes, the goal was always to be able to do the shorter runs. So kids to school, me to work. I work 18 miles down the road, so a 40-mile round trip. And that's 90% of our journeys. The weekends running the kids to their mates, taking them swimming, all that usual sort of stuff. I thought that's the way to go. And then in between all this, I put solar panels on the garage and thought, well, we can soak up the spare electricity rather than exporting it and stuff. So it all sort of fitted together, and I've calculated that the EV runs at 3p a mile when you charge it overnight. And the Volvo was 22p a mile. So when you look at the maths of it, it's not hard to justify.
Pretty straightforward, really. And so that was it. And the car you converted, we'll talk about what car it is in a second, that was a car you already owned then?
No, I foolishly started with buying the car, and I thought if I buy the car, then I'm sort of committing to it.
I've got to do it now.
Got to do it now. Yeah, exactly. I thought, So I have a BMW 325 as like my wife's car, but and I've done clutch and gearbox on that, and I thought, well, this looks pretty straightforward to take the engine out and put a motor in it. So the BMW was the obvious choice. I had various code readers and things for it. So, we found on eBay a 320D Touring because we were getting rid of our Volvo estate. And I paid 500 quid for it, drove it back from Weymouth with a smoky turbo. In fact, I think at the end of the day, the guy said the dual mass flywheel was going, but when I took it apart, the centre prop bearing was shot to bits, so I rather suspect it was not dual mass at all, but 550 quid and it was a runner.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
It's amazing how many of those. So what is it? It's a BMW, it's a 320D, what series?
It's an E46, so it's a 2005. It's the last of the E46s. 6-speed gearbox, not that matters now, but it was... I like the E46. I was a bit concerned about doing anything too modern, getting involved in the CAN and trying to keep all that stuff running. And again, because I had the E46 already, I was sort of familiar with that, and I thought it was sort of in the sweet spot between not too old but not too modern, that it was going to be a nightmare.
And all right from a rust perspective, which E46s aren't always?
Actually, it was better than mine. It's I mean, I put front wings on mine and the rear arches need doing on my one. So, no, this was in better shape than that. And in fact, interestingly, it turned out to be an unusual car because we took it to a Bicester Scramble, which is a kind of an ad hoc show. I live in Bicester, so we go down. And I took the EV and opened the bonnet on it just so people could have a look. And it got lots of interest from the pictures I've sent you. And one of the guys was he runs a YouTube channel called Mildly Interesting Cars of London, I think. And he came across it and he loves E46s. And he said, this is a really unusual car, he said, because it's got wind-up windows in the back. And he said what BMW did was they took all the bits off it and called it the sport model because it was lighter. So it's got wind-up windows, no buttons on the steering wheel, no frilly bits, no sunroof. He said, yeah, this is a rare car. So
it's a nice slick top as well. Brilliant.
Yeah, it's okay.
So you bought the car. What was next? What was the next step?
So that was I think we picked up August 2022. My son and I took the engine out of it and just sort of thought we'd better see what size the engine bay looks like and what we've got to play with. So we did that. And at this stage, I was going down the open inverter route with the Prius motor. And there's a firm nearby who repair taxis, so they've got Prius stuff coming out of their ears. And picked all that stuff up for kind of next to nothing, really. And started getting that running on the bench, following the tried and tested route of, the setup with a light bulb and, kind of all that sort of stuff going on. Got that turning and thought, okay, so here we go. Now I've got the motor turning on the bench. We'll turn us, start looking at the mechanical side of it. And I think round about that time, there were some questions on the forum about the actual power output of the Prius. And it's a big, heavy old lump, that thing. And I was looking at it thinking, it's quite tricky to get in. It's very wide. And it was at that stage I then sort of, before I started doing too much mechanicals, I swapped to do the Mitsubishi Outlander rear motor, but still keeping the Prius inverter with the open inverter board, and got that running on the bench with some help with forum members and things, and went down that route.
Think Jamie had something to do with that choice, didn't he?
Jamie very much helped me, as did Pete along the way. All very helpful people. Getting the tuning right is always the tricky bit with this, and I think my soldering skills ultimately proved to be probably part of the ultimate problem, because there's a bit of surface mount soldering to do when you get the board. And actually, my board was ordered during lockdown, and there was some chip supply issues.
Yeah.
And when it was delivered, it had the wrong CPU on it. So the first thing I did was try and get it software loaded, and couldn't, and was tearing my hair out thinking step one, and I'm kind of failing. But Jamie stepped in, helped me, and replaced that. We got all that going, and I went ahead with the Mitsubishi rear with the Prius inverter with the open inverter board, plus the Outlander charger. Got all that running with Jamie's help and the articles in the wiki. Made up a big adapter plate, as you can see, from a big chunk of aluminium, and just sort of lined it up in the garage as best I could, and made up the coupler with the two splines.
Yeah. Where did you get the spines from clutch centres?
It's the clutch centre on the BMW side, and on the motor side, my motor came with a diff.
Oh, okay, so you pulled the piece out of that.
And I've subsequently done that again to get another one. I'm not entirely comfortable with my coupler at the moment. When I had some recent issues, I took it all apart, and there does appear to be some wear in it. So I'm making up a new one with a Rotoflex coupling in it, as opposed to kind of a direct drive. It is wearing the splines on the motor end, and I think the alignment's not quite right. It's again amateurish in the garage with the gearbox and the Black & Decker and stuff. We did the best we could. It is what it is, really.
But you've got a garage to work in, at least.
I've got a lovely workshop. I'm fortunate enough to, when I moved here, to build that, and I've got a 2-post lift.
Wow. Okay.
Makes life really, really easy to get, up and down, and props off and exhausts, and if you gutted the car quite easily, and really spoiled for all the bits and pieces that we have, welding and all those sorts of metal work, and can
you see me going green?
Well, the 2-post is an interesting thing on its own, because actually once you dive into it, they're not that hard to get going if you've got, and it's outside. It's actually just under the carport. It's not indoors.
Oh wow, okay.
So I keep it greased up, and it seems to be quite happy.
Brilliant. Well, life goals for me. Very much life goals. 2-post lift. So you went. So originally, so that is Prius inverter, Outlander motor, Outlander charger, and the usual stuff for sort of power steering, etc.
Yeah, the usual tried and tested power steering. What is it? Vauxhall Zafira, is it? I think
Yeah,
people use.
Zafira Screamer, I think it's known as now.
Yes, exactly. And a vacuum pump, I think, of an Audi or something to keep the brakes going.
Yeah, the UP38. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did all that. That ticks away in quite happily. And then the only issue I really had was keeping the ABS working. It threw a bit of a hissy fit when I did all this, and I couldn't get it to work properly. So in the end, I sent the unit away because the E46 ABSs are known to have a fault with them. So I sent it away. They said, we can find nothing wrong with it. Do you want us to refurb it anyway? And I said, well, you may as well. And it came back and it worked. So, it must have had something intermittent that they couldn't reproduce. So,
and are you feeding it any CAN bus signals to delete error lights and things off the dashboard?
Well, not the ABS unit. No, in fact, I had a chat with the garage about MOTing it, and I said, there might be some error lights on, like the engine light. He said, well, I'm not bothered about that. There's no engine. He said, as long as the ABS light is off and the airbag light is off, he said, I'm happy. I said, well, there's still a light on which tells you, it thinks you've got the hand. Oh, yeah, the traction's not working. That's still on. He said, well, there's no traction control. I'm not bothered. And I said, well, what should I do? And he said, take the bulbs out. So, and that was from the chief MOT tester. So they've been really good about it, actually. And
So Andy Powell has sent me some code to turn your traction control back on, and turn the light off on it. Certainly for Z3, which should probably work on an E46 as well.
Okay. We did get all the dashboard working again. The RPM, the fuel gauge dummies, for the battery condition, the coolant temperature works, done all that, and got the kind of coolant, overheat light working. So some of it working, but it's a funny thing, that dash, isn't it? Because it's got two buses on it, and it sort of sits between the IKE and the CAN, and it throws a hissy fit every now and then. I don't know what the oil light's doing or what it thinks it's doing.
They went through about 93 versions of it as well. I mean, even just on the Z3, there's about 15 different iterations of that dash, as far as I can tell. I mean, I've literally got one here.
Right. Yes.
And it's maybe a year later than the one that's in my car, and it's entirely different on the inside.
Is that right? Yeah. I mean, I've got two like that in the garage, and we played with them, and it's as good as I'm happy with it. And I occasionally have to reset the dash. It just, as long as the speed and the RPM work, I'm not too concerned about the rest. So it's nice to have, but it's not mission critical.
So you started in August 2022, did you say? And when did you get it on the road?
Car. I think I first of all got it on the road. Probably have a look at probably around about May time this year. So it took, I would say, about 10 months from getting the car to getting it on the road. Had one set of BMW batteries in it from the start, and put those in the front behind the radiator with the charger, so built up some layers there. Then put another pack in the back, so a 12 kilowatt pack in the back, wired all that up. Got all the BMS working, although I haven't got the balancing working yet, but the BMS reports in. But there's the biggest delta at the moment is only 30 millivolts, so I'm not panicking about that just yet.
Yeah.
But I do need to do some work on that. And then I drove it for, quite happily, for probably like 1,000 miles. And it sort of went through a funny thing. Every now and then I'd get in it and I'd try and pull out the parking space, and it would trip. So I'd turn it off, start it, and it just weirdly increased in frequency from like once a week to twice a week to once every day, gradually just in the decline until it got to the point where I couldn't drive it. I couldn't trust it anymore. And it would trip occasionally when I was out. And, with Pete and Jamie on the forum, went through probably 8 full days of troubleshooting. I had spare inverters, cabling, everything I could think. I had the gearbox out because the gearbox guy convinced me the torque of the motor was spinning the gears on the shaft, and took all that out, got a different motor, went through everything. And in the end, I think there must be some fault with the open inverter board that I couldn't diagnose. It's too complicated for me to get into that. And I thought, well, it had a little bit of a checkered history with the CPU change and things. So I then thought, well, do I do that again, or do I do what seems to be more popular now and go down the zombie route? people seem to be having lots of success with that. So I picked up an Outlander inverter and got that running with the motor, and then did a little zombie VCU, alongside my dashboard one, a little Teensy 4, and got that working. And that's been back on the road now. Well, I had a bit of trouble. The other trouble I had was I had some corruption in the display I couldn't work out, and which kind of held it back because I couldn't get the dashboard to work properly. And I had problems with the BMS, all sorts of kind of weird, random things. It's only going to be back on the road for probably 3 weeks now. So it's been off the road for probably 2 straight months while I sorted all these things out. But it's back now. I'm using it again and driving it tomorrow. And it has a range for about 65 miles at the minute.
And that's with 24 kilowatt hours in?
So it's a 9 and a 12, so 21. Yeah. Interesting. I'm probably one of the few people who've had the opportunity to drive the Prius inverter with the motor and then the Outlander inverter in the same car, same setup. And everyone who's got in it says the Outlander inverter is smoother. Just difficult to pin down exactly what it is, but it's a bit like going from a 4-cylinder to a 6-cylinder car or something. It's definitely quicker. It's probably 15 to 20% quicker than it was, substantially, I would say. And that could be down to I didn't tune the Prius too hard, because, as Jamie found out, if you start tuning it quite hard, it starts tripping out.
Yeah.
So we got to a point where I was, the performance was adequate. I wasn't going to complain about it and left it there. But this out of the box is just better, and you can just plant your foot and not worry about a trip or anything like that, and it just it takes off. And in first gear, it's really pretty rapid.
I mean, given that I'm sat on a Outlander rear inverter and I have the Outlander rear motor in my car, and I have a zombie inverter hanging around, it's quite tempting. But actually, in first gear, my car just spins the wheels. So doesn't trip, just spins the wheels.
Okay, right.
So I'm probably not going to do it because it's quite powerful enough. But
well, if you've got a working solution, that doesn't seem to. I didn't, so I decided that was a change. And there's something quite nice and simple about using the Outlander inverter. You just send it one number. You overcam one number. That's all you need. And that the speed regen, kind of like it's just sort of the simplicity appealed. Although I felt slightly aggrieved to have left the whole open inverter thing behind because I sort of enjoyed that and the parameters and the tuning of it and the interface and stuff.
Yeah, I do have I actually have a spare Outlander rear motor as well, albeit it does need a new bearing and a new resolver, or at least the resolver wiring sorting. But yeah, maybe something for a future project, we shall see. I can do side-by-side comparison. We do a drag race between them, that'd be fun.
Yes, yeah.
Any issues apart from sort of pulling out bulbs, any issues getting it approved, getting MOT'd and approved, or getting it insured?
And not really. A few people said we want an engineer's report, and I said, okay, so what do you mean by engineer? Do you mean the MOT guy, or do you mean somebody with like letters after their name? And when push came to shove, they just said, I'll just get the garage to write something. So, I know my local garage says, look, can you just do something on headed paper to say that you've approved it and there's no bricks hanging, And they just did a simple letter, and the insurers, not everybody wanted to insure it. My regular insurer turned it down, and as did several others, but I can't remember who I went with in the end. Somebody recommended on the forum.
Probably Adrian Flux.
Yeah, I think it could have been, and it was a little bit more than my road car, but I'm comfortable with that. It was, it's quite a thing to insure, I suppose. It's it's a risk for them.
Apart from the sort of the degrading performance and the tripping, what were the biggest challenges along the way? Any big setbacks?
No, I don't think so. The way I describe this project is it's complex but not complicated. It's a series of steps, all of which require detail and thinking about, but none of them were especially taxing. But you've got to get them all right and all in the right order, and for it all to work. So, and that's why I would recommend to people. It's actually easier than you might think in many regards, because you get through one step and then it's on to the next one, and it's a lot of 12-volt wiring. The best piece of advice I got from Jamie was plan out the 12-volt wiring. Don't get strung up on the the high voltage and stuff, because there's not actually much of that. And he was absolutely spot on. I, bought a fuse box and relay box and spent a lot of time doing that right. And I wouldn't have done that without the advice. I mean, it's a good thing.
If you ever saw the wiring on Jamie's before he tidied it all up, I think you'd know that he learned from experience.
Well, he did. He was very good, actually. When I was looking into it, I think before I bought the car, or maybe just after I bought it, me and my son went up and saw Jamie at home and saw the Beetle. And he was very sweet with me. He kind of let me drive it, kind of take it for a spin. And we went out in it. And I thought, okay, I get this now. And you're right, the wiring was, I looked at it and thought, okay, so I'm not going to do that. But actually, in a funny way, it does sort of end up looking like that. I prototyped it from the beginning, and I had like little junction boxes bolted down, and I knew I was going to make a lot of changes. So definitely the outset was prototype it and be able to move the wires around very easily. And now I'm just getting to the stage where I'm cleaning that up and covering bits of wire over in proper coverings and stuff.
I think I'm on the 5th iteration of my wiring, and there's definitely going to be a 6th.
And the other interesting thing that happened on the back of going to the show was we bumped into a company called Electrogenic, and they do custom conversions, and they're down the road from us in Kidlington, and they got talking to me and my son about it, and they were fascinated by the car. They're using the same Zafira pump, and stuff like that, and lots of crossovers. So on the back of that, I think my son's going to do some work experience with them.
Oh, amazing.
They were very interested in him and said, look, come down in the summer and spend some time with us. And I've been in touch with them off and on. We went to see the factory where they do their conversions. They invited us down. So they were just very hospitable and great people, and very much doing, when we went to the factory, they're doing some custom things, very much along the lines that everyone here has done. Take an old classic and take the bits out and convert it on a one-off basis.
Yeah, it's really good to hear that they're sort of that nice crossover between the sort of the professional and the DIY. Just a random question, this might seem odd. What oil are you using in your power steering pump? Because we were having this conversation today about how noisy they are and whether they're actually using the recommended oil, the oil that's recommended for the pump rather than the oil that's recommended for the rack.
I'm using ATF fluid.
Right, okay.
Now, interesting, the guy from Electrogenic, he said, we've been through a lot of these, and he said, if they're noisy, they're going to fail. And he said, when we get them in, we run them up, and if they're noisy, he said, we just chuck them in the bin. He said that you'll find quiet ones, and they're the good ones. But so that was their take on it. He didn't say anything about oil. I could ask them, actually.
And that said, I've been through 2, and they both sounded exactly the same. So I don't know whether I just got 2 bad ones. But I am going to try putting the, I can't remember what it's called, but the green stuff that's recommended for the Zafira is very different in some ways to the, it's a more sort of typical hydraulic oil than the ATF that's recommended for the rack.
I think if one thing I would do differently next time is, that is the noisiest part of the car. And it consumes quite a bit of electricity. So I think I will probably look at doing an electric rack next time.
Was there ever an electric rack for the E46? There wasn't, was
No,
there?
there never was. But I also fortunate enough to own an old TVR.
Okay.
Without power steering. And a lot of the guys on that forum, they take, I think, the...
Corsa B.
Yeah, Corsa, is it? And they convert those as women and TVR to do that. And it seems to work all right, even with a 5-litre V8 sat over it. So I think if I were doing it again, I would probably... take the time and effort to do that and ditch the noisy pump.
That and an iBooster are definitely future upgrades for me.
Yeah.
Either a Prius or a Corsa rack and an iBooster instead of the UP38.
Okay, yeah. Well, and of course, once you've done this, you start thinking about your next one. I thought, oh, well, this is working, but there are things I would do differently and, different approaches. So, in the back of my mind, there's another one coming at some point.
I was going to say, do you have another project in mind?
I think Pete is doing a smart, and I would like to do a smart coupe or something like that. Keep it small and fast, and that would appeal, but
definitely
not very family friendly.
No,
it's just the cost of the batteries, really.
Although they're coming down all the time. Regularly seeing things go at £30 per kilowatt hour on eBay now.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah. If you buy the bigger packs, certainly.
Yeah, I've been looking at the things like Kia Niro packs. They're kind of big slabs, but you've got to have sort of a certain design of vehicle to take that. Or I guess maybe you can break them up. I don't know, but Yeah, that's coming in the next project. Something like that.
I don't want to mention them because prices will go through the roof, but there's a particular manufacturer and type of pack I'm looking at which is quite cheap and has very usefully sized modules that also have very easy mounting options.
Right, it is useful to, like the BMW packs you can split up, and to mount them individually really helps.
Yeah. And what's been the most rewarding aspect of the project?
It does put a smile on my face driving it. And my son loves it. He's a petrolhead as well. And just, Dad, this is really cool. So it's been a good thing for him. And it's just I guess I'm in a small way I'm proud of it. And the fact it's been done, I think I'm $3,500 all in.
Wow. Okay, that's good.
When I say I've got an electric car, I can't drop 20 or 30,000 on the car, nor would I. So. I'm pleased that it's been done on a budget and it's usable.
Yeah, I think that's a good benchmark these days. Like sub $4,000 for a usable family EV conversion. I think is. I'm not saying everyone can hit that target. I certainly went over, but then, I'm building something fancy that's going to be a car for life rather than something practical. But, I think a number of people now are doing the sort of sub $4,000, 4K UK pounds for a good usable EV. I think it's brilliant.
I think it's doable. I think I spent $2,000 on the batteries and $500 on the car, and some bits you can't get away from, like the front to rear cables. I couldn't find anything suitable. I had to buy that at £18 a metre. There was like £250 worth of cables or something. So I tell myself $3,500. It's probably nearer 4 if I top it off. But it's there or thereabouts, isn't it?
Right, the question I ask everybody: what's your favourite tool?
Well, actually, so a few years ago...
Is it the two-post lift?
No, it's not. That is, I'll tell you that is good. It's a Sealy quarter-inch motorised drive. I use it a lot because, the Prius inverter had 1 million screws around it, and all these things have, and so it takes them off really easily. That's probably the thing. And one thing I bought halfway through was a bonnet lamp, which is one of those ones that stretches and hooks around the bonnet each side and has a LED strip. I mean, that thing is just brilliant.
I'm genuinely tempted to mount one of those permanently on the underside of my bonnet. I have it lifted up so much.
Yeah, exactly. That's been a brilliant purchase. They're probably the two favourite things.
Brilliant. Well, listen, Alex, I will post photos of your build in the show notes. Thank you so much for coming on. I want to come and have a drive because I really need to build a proper family car at some point, and an E46 would be amazing as a fellow BMW fan.
Anytime, Tom, you're welcome.
Brilliant. Right, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed that, found it useful. Again, always love comments, questions. Keep the feedback coming. This is very much meant to be a sort of part of the EV community. I can't really contribute in terms of my engineering skill, albeit, there are some 3D printed designs of mine still floating around the forums that people are still using. If I can contribute by answering questions and getting brilliant people like Alex who've built their own to answer your questions, then so much the better. So please do like, subscribe. There'll be lots more of these coming this year. I've got loads more interviews lined up. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye. And thanks again, Alex. Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Tom.